Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking about episode 4 of season 2 of Young Justice called Salvage. Um, Overall, this is a rather subdued episode, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad episode. It's just a quiet one with a lot of setup going on. But let's get into things and start talking. The first thing that I want to note is that this is another Greg Weisman episode. Greg's a guy, he's written several episodes of the show before. If you look at his Wikipedia page, he's got a very impressive record in writing for superhero kind of animation. He's also, amazingly enough, the voice, I say, of Snapper Carr in this very series. We do get to see Snapper this episode, but he doesn't have any lines. But Greg is, of course, best known to folks of my generation as the main guy behind the old Gargoyles TV show, which a lot of people have very fond memories of. I sort of missed the boat on Gargoyles. It came on TV just a little after I sort of lost interest in anything related to Disney, but I understand why a lot of folks do have fond memories of it. Anyway, let's move on and start talking about stuff. We get to see Whisper Adair again, voiced once again by the great Gray DeCilly, I think is how you say her name. Actually, that's probably not how you say her name at all. But she's doesn't have a whole lot to say, but this episode. But she's a great voice actress. We know her, of course, as Azula on Avatar: The Last Airbender. She was Sam Manson on Danny Phantom. She's been Daphne Blake on just about everything Scooby-Doo for the last several years. And, of course, she's also Aya and Bleez on the Green Lantern show. So, again, we don't get to see much from Whisper, just a few lines, and the whole subplot with her and Mannheim and stealing the Appalachian from the Hall of Justice. I just didn't think that was a terribly strong episode. It just seemed like it was just there to have Superboy and Blue Beetle hang out together and give them something to do. I did like that it was very true to the Appalachians from the comics. That was nice. The JLA Year 1 story, which I mentioned previously, is a very good one, so it was nice to see that brought into the show's continuity as well. To keep talking about that particular plot thread, I was pleased that, as I've said before, the last time we were seeing Blue Beetle, he pretty much dropped the whole dropping gratuitous Spanish into his speech. Here he does it, but he only does it twice. And while I still think it's somewhat unnecessary, at least they do it in a way that it doesn't feel like I'm being hit over the head with the fact that, Jaime is Mexican American, he can speak English and Spanish. Although we do kind of have to give him I guess I should maybe call it a 2.5, seeing as how he does literally, during the course of the show, say that he's bilingual. But anyway, moving away from that, let's talk about Superboy really briefly. I did really enjoy seeing that Superboy is now the guy who's going around getting on the rookies' cases about not having done their homework, not really understanding the history of superheroes and all this, which is really just a very far cry from where he was when we originally see him. He is sort of now the elder statesman, in a way, of the Young Justice team. But it is a role for him that makes sense. While physically he is, of course, not aged, he is mentally, just like everybody else on the team except for Nightwing, mentally he's 21 years old. And given his length of experience, it is perfectly natural for him to take that sort of a role. And let's not forget, of course, who Superboy's mentor is. I mean, of course, Superman, who is, at least in this reality, the unquestioned leader of the Justice League. So it makes perfect sense that Superboy is going to step into that role of being the leader, the mentor figure in Young Justice in its current incarnation. And just to kind of wrap up that plot with Superboy and Blue Beetle, we did get to see Sportsmaster again. Not really sure who he's hanging out with. Maybe it's Darkseid, maybe it's not. Who knows? Give credit to where it's due. Sportsmaster, if I'm doing my math on this, has got to be pushing 60 at this point, but it looks like he's still in really, really, really good shape. And to add one line final thing, in this reality, apparently, the scarab that gives Jaime his Blue Beetle powers is not an alien artifact like it was in the comics. It was there created by some aliens called the Reach. Here it's a creation of Ted Kord, the original Blue Beetle. And apparently in this reality, it was the Light who killed Ted. While in the standard comic book reality, it was Maxwell Lord who killed him. I'm alright with this, but just throwing it out there like that when Ted is not an established character from the previous season, it gives the audience no real reason to care about Ted. It's just, okay, he was the source of the technology that gave Jaime his powers, and the bad guys killed him. We are given no real reason to care about the fact that Ted is dead. And frankly, considering just how emotional Ted's death was in the comics for the readers, even people like me who had been generally rather ambivalent towards Blue Beetle were genuinely moved by how extremely heroic his death was. And to see it just kind of made into a throwaway line here did bother me a little bit. But let's move over and start talking about our plot line going on with Roy. Now, if you're not familiar with the comics, it may not come as a complete surprise to you, given the way that Roy looks most of this episode, that back in the 1970s, the early 1970s, I think it might have been 1972 or so, they did a story in the comics where Green Arrow found out that Roy, who was still Speedy at the time, had become addicted to heroin. Now, keep in mind, this was an astonishingly bold move to do in the 1970s, to turn a teen sidekick of an established hero who'd been around since the 40s and make him a junkie. I mean, that was seriously groundbreaking stuff in the 70s, and even today in comics, something like that happening, while obviously it would certainly not be without precedent, would certainly be a pretty bold step. And while there's certainly no mention is made of drugs, just the look of Roy's look, the fact that he's stealing money from the people he's supposed to help, it's very clearly alluding to that. And honestly, in a way, this search for Roy Harper is an addiction for the adult Roy. It has clearly consumed his life. It has caused him to drive away the people he cares about. And what is clearly an intervention, he completely blows them off, even though they all raise exceptionally valid points, Black Canary points that he is certainly nowhere near the top of his game. Guardian points out that just because he's a clone does not mean that he can't have his life is not worth anything less than anyone else's. And Wally and Nightwing remind him that, okay, you are our friend. You are the Roy that we know, and we care about you. And unfortunately, that just does not get through to him. Roy can only see himself as he even puts it, as a knockoff. That is something that is so wedged in his mind, in his heart, in his soul, that he will push away everyone that he cares about. And then, in an act of supreme irony, it is his former adversary, this villain, who had become his wife, and now the mother of his child. This is what gets through to him. And of course, Leanne and Jade being mother and daughter does come directly from the comics. And Roy, in the comics, of course, does have this, not surprisingly, of course, history of being absolutely insanely protective of his daughter. And I do like that it is this one thing. This here. The fact that he, a clone, had a hand in making this new life. This is the thing that finally gets through to Roy, that snaps him out of it. Now, of course, this is not all. His whole quest for the original Roy Harper is not certainly put aside. In fact, Jade does flat out say she's got the lead. And as we did see at the end of last season, it looks like Guardian was either wrong or possibly lying, because the real original Roy Harper, Speedy, is still on ice somewhere. So it certainly will be very interesting to see where all of that goes. Let me see here. Yes, of course we can't have this episode done right without taking a moment to talk about Wally and Artemis. Where Wally was is, of course, been one of the big questions that fans have been asking since this season started. Here we get the answer to all of that. We don't get exactly why it is that Wally and Artemis both stepped away from the superhero life. Wally did do that once in the comics, but that was mostly to do with his wife having kids. Let's hope they don't. I don't think we're going to be seeing that anytime soon. Although in this reality, Wally and Artemis would now be 21, and just the way that scene was staged at their home, well, that's basically as close as you can possibly get to on a kid's show of saying, yes, these people are indeed having sex. So I'm sure there are some shippers out there who are extraordinarily happy right at the moment. I've never been one to get very passionate about shipping, but I do have to say that the dynamic, the playful teasing and joking around between Artemis and Wally, it did feel very genuine. It did feel like a very satisfying emotional follow-up to what we saw back in Old Lang Syne. And I definitely do want to see more about why it is they stepped away from the superhero life. Possibly could this tie into Tula's death? And yeah, I'm going to say it right now. I'm thinking at some point during this season we're probably going to see those two suit up again, because as we have seen, Sportsmaster is still out there running around causing trouble, and I can't help but think that whatever else may be going on in her life, Artemis would really, really, really still like to see him locked away in jail for the rest of his days. Well, folks, I really can't think of too much else that I can add to this episode. As I said, it's a pretty solid episode, but it's one that is mostly just there to set things up for what's going to be happening later on. But it does so in a way that is still really well done and very entertaining. So, if you're going to do a setup episode, this is a pretty darn good example of how to do it and how to do it right. Anyway, until next time, as always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. You can also follow me on Twitter @HoosierJedi. And until I see you next time, take care and have a good one.